What's up? Happy Monday. Welcome back to your Monday message. I am Dharma Shakti, your host, with your weekly dose of something inspirational for your yogic journey and any other journey that you're on. Look, today I want to talk about two essential components specifically to the yogic path, but really could be applied anywhere. But this is something that is emphasized throughout many yogic traditions, through many yogic lineages, and you'll find it throughout many yogic literature. But today we're going to be pulling from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, so let's get into it. We're going to talk about how the mind is steadied through practice and non-attachment. Yes, how do we create steadiness in the mind? This comes from the Yoga Sutras, chapter 1, verse 12. And it's about showing up with effort without grasping to the outcome, showing up with action without grasping to the timeline of the outcome. Look, have you ever done the work but still felt frustrated about how long it was taking? Look, I just want to name the tension that a lot of us are feeling, if you can relate to this. We're often willing to practice, we're willing to show up, we're willing to put in the effort, but we are struggling with the waiting. We show up, but we still cling to results, and that impacts the state of mind that we have. So this teaching matters now because many people aren't struggling because they aren't practicing. They're struggling because they're practicing with pressure, which leads to a lot of chatter in the mind, a lot of what Patanjali calls vrittis, these movements in the mind that make us unsettled. So this yogic teaching I am pulling specifically from, again, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, chapter 1, verse 12, and the Sanskrit is Abhyāsa-vairāgyābhyāṁ tan-nirodhaḥ. This means that the mind is steadied through practice and non-attachment, Abhyāsa and Vairāgya. This particular idea, this approach to support the practice is introduced early on in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, introduced early on in his sort of systematic approach to achieving yoga. And Patanjali names these two pillars that calm what he calls the mental fluctuations, or just the movement of the mind. And he's not naming that it's effort alone, and he's not naming that it's surrender alone, but that really it's both together. So how we can interpret what Patanjali is trying to convey is that practice without attachment becomes sustainable. When we practice with attachment, it's not sustainable, it's really hard for us in the West to grasp this paradox. How do I practice with passion and with a conviction, with fortitude, but not be attached to an outcome? Well, this is the yogic journey. Let's unpack some Sanskrit words. Abhyāsa, steady practice or consistent returning. Vairāgya is non-grasping or releasing of the clinging or dispassion on attachment. And nirodha is a settling or a calming or a steadying. It really means to kind of wind up, to reel in, so to reel in all the movement of the mind. The insight that this verse is trying to give us, amongst the rest of the text, is that transformation that comes from the yogic practice requires both commitment and spaciousness, effort and non-attachment, consistency without clinging to what's going to happen. Now, as always, my biggest offering to you is, how can you apply these teachings, these ancient teachings, to your modern day life? So here are 5 core messages from this verse that you can glean. Number 1, practice builds stability. Showing up creates familiarity and trust. That consistency is very important. Number 2, attachment creates pressure. Grasping tightens the mind, and this is not good for anything. Attachment creates this clinging energy, this sort of desperate energy, and it's just not a good energy for the growth of anything. Number 3, consistency needs spaciousness. Right? Effort without release leads to burnout. That consistency needs the time and the room to grow. Number 4, letting go allows for growth. Results unfold in their own rhythm, not through forced effort. And number 5, balance sustains the path. Practice keeps us engaged, and non-attachment keeps us free. The balance between our practice and our non-attachment is what sustains our path. Okay, when we get too attached to the outcome, we have too much expectation or too much clinging to our expectation, it starts to sort of degrade and chip away at the practice. And what it ends up doing is bringing more ego into what we're doing. And the whole point of yoga is to sort of disarm the ego from being the main driver of your life. So it's a little counterproductive, yeah? And as much as I want you to apply these things to your modern life, also I want you to reflect on what this is bringing up for you and where in your life you can apply this. So ask yourself, where am I practicing with hidden pressure? What outcomes am I quietly attached to? How do I relate to timelines for change? What do I equate those timelines to mean? And how could I bring in more spaciousness to what I'm doing? And last but not least, what would practice feel like without expectation? Whatever your practice is, whatever it is that you are consistently returning to, what would it feel like without expectation? Maybe you're learning an instrument. Maybe you're on a new health regimen, right? Maybe you're doing a new discipline. Can you show up without that expectation? You know, the expectation that says, it should happen at this time and it should look like this. What would it feel like to practice without that expectation? So here's something that you can try this week with your practices. When you show up, can you do a show up and release? Okay, so whatever you're showing up to steadily this week, I want you to pair it with a simple letting go gesture. A breath that's like, letting go. And a pause. And an inner statement that says, I release the outcome. I release the outcome. So again, showing up to your practices this week, give a nice letting go breath. Pause. And I'm just here. I release my expectations to the outcome. I release my clinging to the outcome. Listen, it's important that you remember that yoga is not asking you to be in control of your results. Yoga is inviting you to just show up, to let your practice be sincere, to let your release be gentle and not forced, to let your growth come as it comes without forcing the outcome. Trust that steadiness grows from both practicing with sincerity and releasing our control or our expectation of the outcome. This is the great paradox that so many of us struggle in so many areas of our life. How do I show up with commitment and sincerity and passion and desire without being attached to the outcome? Well, it takes practice. It takes really unraveling all the places in which the ego has made its way into our consciousness. And when we can show up with heart and not let the ego guide the way of, I have to do it now, it has to look like this, and it's got to turn out this way. When we show up with heart, when we show up with sincerity, when we allow the growth to be as it is, and we learn to really trust and have faith in the process, then growth can really happen. All right, if you liked this message, hit the like button down below. Of course, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment. Let me know how this may have helped you. And maybe it didn't help you. Maybe it just kind of got you thinking a little bit more. This is not an easy one. Like, how do I show up with a consistent practice and I let go of attachment? It's a very difficult one for us to really embody, but it's one worth really leaning into. And how? Well, little by little, step by step, figure out where you're attached and how can you soften while you continue to show up and practice. We're a society and a culture that is so conditioned to base our value and the value of our efforts on outcome. But we're so much more than the outcomes. You know, we all love this saying that says, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But yet so many of us are attached to the destination. Can you just be on your journey? And that's really what this verse is asking of you. And it's not just asking, saying this is what's required. It's saying, can you just be on your journey? And when you just are simply on your journey, the mind will steady. But when you're on a journey attached to a particular outcome, the mind is just gonna go berserk. It's gonna be all over the place with what ifs and how comes and why nots. And so can we just be on the journey? Can we allow ourselves to connect to the passion and the desire and the intention, the calling of the heart without the attachment of the ego? Can we do that and allow some steadiness in our process as we're just on a journey? We're not here to really glorify outcomes and destinations that we've arrived at. Those are meaningless in the grand scheme of life. But it is the culmination of our journey that gives so much meaning to our life. So be on your journey. And please remember that your life does have meaning. Your presence does have purpose. And your existence has value. Don't be attached to what any of those look like, but can you just lean into the truth of that while you are on your journey? Sending you so much love from my heart to yours. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Enjoy your week. I hope that this inspires you as you move through your week. Can you just be on your journey this week? Don't think about the outcomes. Just show up to what you know is in front of you and what you know you need to be doing and you want to be doing. All right, I'm going to end it here. I love you so much. Sending you tons of joy from my heart to yours. So much love from me to you. And of course, and always, peace and blessings and namaste.